What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Lettermen Row, and welcome to another off-season report. It's a bonus edition because we were back inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for the first time in a long time, fellas. We talked to all of the Ohio State assistant coaches. No Ryan Day appearance. That's okay. Take what we can get. Mickey Marotti as well. Big day inside the program as they returned to off-season workouts. Summer workouts began as Tony Alford's leaving the football facility right now.
He always deserves a salute from me.
It is 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and Tony Alford is finally done with his workday.
And I didn't even get to talk to him today because I was wherever I was, and suddenly he was gone. Come on in here, Tony.
I think he's going to make an appearance.
I just spoke. How are you?
Good. How are you, man? Hey, how many players you got at running back?
None.
5 big time?
Zero.
Huh?
None.
Tony, thanks for joining the show.
You know, that seemed to be the offensive theme today. Don't talk about anybody specifically. Thank you, Tony.
The offensive theme, don't talk about anybody specifically, but talk about a lot of competitiveness. Andy, Tim, 40-year vet, Andy Backstrom. I'm Spencer Holbrook. We'll get through with the introductions. It's all presented by Buyers Auto. Defensively, though, a couple names start to pop out a little bit. You learn a couple things about guys who we're hoping to see make some progress this summer. Just a lot to break down, but I think the big headline here is that all the coaches are back. A couple of them went on vacations, a couple of them away from the building for a few days. All the coaches are back after a long weekend. Players are here, summer enrollees are here. You start to form some opinions on freshmen. And it's a really critical time for the program, Tim, to just be diving back into football.
Yeah, here's what we got to do. We got to name every player and say what was said or not said about every player. You want to do that? I know you don't. Bottom line is I come away from this, like Tony Alford, he's got 5 running backs. We know this is the deepest running back room in the country, in my opinion, of guys that could contribute to this football team this year. Wide receiver, Brian Hartline's got all those guys. So many of the 2 of them popped out, and really, I'm not sure you're going to miss them. You know what I mean? When you've got headlined by Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, and then right on down the line. Defensively, obviously they're still looking for an offensive line. We're going to get into that, a starting offensive line. Defensively, what really stands out to me, Jim Knowles was asked extensively or repeatedly about C.J. Hicks, for example, a guy who really popped in the spring, and how are you going to try to work him in, maybe even, in that jack position. He and Mitchell Melton, if Mitchell Melton's ready to go, there's a guy to look for because they have him in their head. This is what stands out. They have him in their head. They got to get him in the game somehow. He had that kind of spring. And then the word I used with him was pops. If he pops, then you may see more playing time for like a C.J. Hicks. And then round down the line. And then the other thing that stands out is when you talk to Larry Johnson, defensive line coach, and to Jim Knowles, man, when I start looking at teams and you start wanting to know whether you want to pick them to be special, I always look at those guys up front, either offensively and defensively. You got question marks about the offensive front right now as we speak. Defensively, that's a deep group, man. That defensive front with JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Mike Hall, all those guys on the inside, and then the influx of Taiwan Malone, the transfer from Ole Miss, guy who wanted to come here almost the first time, and then maybe he got another shot at it, and he showed up as a transfer portal dude. Man, that's going to set the tone for this defense. As much as we talk about, as Jim Knowles called it, Tommy No Thumbs, Tommy Eichenberg, Steel Chambers, all these guys they've got back. But that defensive front is going to set the tone for this defense. Should be markedly better.
I don't know if you know this, Andy. A little bit of an information overload today.
Sorry, I just added to it. Right?
No, Tim, it's okay. First time in the building in 6-7 weeks. Get a little excited. That's okay. That's what we're here for.
I always like talking to coaches, man.
Andy, there seemed to be an excitement among the coaches just to get back in here and get back to summer workouts and get to work here, especially on the defensive side. I just thought that there's a real sense of optimism and energy from that defensive staff right now.
Yeah, I think Jim Knowles especially has done a lot of reflection, introspection, looking back on last year, and really what he has within this program. His prior stops, he did a lot with maybe a little bit less. And now he kind of knows, well, hey, I got a lot of talent here. I don't need to ride as heavily on this back 7 idea or the 4-2-5 strictly. I need to be able to maximize the potential that I do have here. And I think we'll see a little bit of a difference in some of the personnel that we'll see on the field. It'll be dictated more on the opponent and what Ohio State can do that week, and less on this is what we're doing every single week, this is what I've always done, and this is why it will work.
Yeah.
And I think that's big. Probably the biggest change I've noticed in terms of coaching staff philosophy on the defense is more of, hey, our personnel is going to be dictated by matchups, especially with that nickel safety spot and that, 3 safeties in the back end. And then also with the jack position, it seems like CJ Hicks and Mitchell Melton are the 2 guys in which they really want to use and be able to pop and get playing time out of more guys in the defense. So I would say that's the biggest shift I've seen defensively. And then there's a lot of optimism that comes from that.
And there's 2 avenues that you can take here. You can take the avenue, which I don't think we're going to take today, where you dive into the depth chart and what we learned about individual players, or you kind of take some overall kind of 30,000-foot perspective takeaways from this. And I think that's one that we can take is, I asked Tim Walton about, the defensive scheme. You asked Perry Eliano about it. You asked Larry Johnson about his unit as a whole rather than just a couple guys here and there. You get a feel for that. And then you ask, Jim Knowles and Perry Eliano together, hey, these safeties, all of these guys. That philosophy just seems to be shifting a little bit on defense. And I heard you ask Jim Knowles about the big plays and things like that. That might be the biggest takeaway as I walk out of here. And we'll get into all of that, of course, as we go through position weeks at Lettermen Row. But just like overall, the defensive mindset seems to be shifting here a little bit this offseason.
It should. They've got almost everybody back that mattered last year on the defense. Think about it. And you got your 2 starting linebackers back in a 4-2-5 scheme. Yeah, Cody Simon played a lot. We expect, like we said, the rising guy in the spring. Anybody could see CJ Hicks was having a tremendous spring.
Yes.
Every time we got to watch him. So now you got that. The thing about it is, Jim Knowles and Andy was touching on this. He's had a year to get familiar with the personnel as much as the personnel got to get familiar with his defense. But that doesn't mean he's not going to be evolving. That defense is not going to be evolving because we saw it in the spring with Jair Brown playing some slot corner stuff as opposed to rolling a safety down. Having a jack of all trades safety, you can put a guy in there who can run with any receiver on the field. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing in Jim Knowles an evolution of his defense. He played that 4-2-5 at Oklahoma State, for example, because that literally was the right scheme for that conference. Now, he has been through the Big Ten once. He understands it. This is they're all these teams work out big time. I'm talking about Big 12, et cetera. But it's a little bit more of a physical league. Let's put it that way. He's got like at least 8, 9 definitely able-bodied bodies. Mm-hmm. That's redundant on that defensive front.
A little
which
bit.
is going to allow him to do. Now, I think he's got a lot of guys up there now to work with that could rise barring injury as Ed Terwilliger walks by us. And but what he is dealing with now is maybe being able to play true poker.
Yeah.
With his defense. You're not going to always see a 4-2-5 out there. You're not going to always see him line up the right way. He's got fresh bodies there like Davison Igbinosun and Jahad Carter, who he really likes.
Yeah.
Until he got hurt in the spring. He talked about how quick he was. He could learn things, et cetera, and apply them on the field. He feels really good about the coaches he's got back and the personnel he's got back. And I think you're going to really see this defense take a major move this year.
Yeah.
Let's play real quick. And I asked him this specifically. Those failings against Georgia and Michigan were almost individual failings.
Yes.
Not so much the scheme, but individual failings. And, but how come you didn't coach them better? Well, yeah, that's what they're all asking themselves, after that season was over. Why didn't they coach themselves? Why didn't they coach these guys better to make the play, not just to whatever? And that's really going to be a big difference this year compared to last year, I think.
Yeah, and it just goes to the shifting in philosophy on defense almost. Not a philosophy, I guess, but just a willingness to mold, if you will.
And you saw him do that some last year, clearly.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden they lose the guy they were going to have at Jack, Mitchell Melton, and they moved Jack Sawyer to Jack. Well, Jack Sawyer is a hell of an athlete, but it is clear that Jack Sawyer is most at home when he's got his hands in not the ground, but those rubber grommets, they have in the artificial turf. He's much more at home being that guy. And now they have other guys, C.J. Hicks and Mitchell Melton coming back, where you don't have to rob Peter to pay Paul. You don't have to maybe take away from this guy's game by putting him somewhere else. And Andy touched on it. That's what stands out. They can mix and match with almost basically every offensive grouping they're going to see this year, in my opinion, and put a credible defense out there.
Where they're not going to shift philosophies is on the offensive side of the ball. They still have Ryan Day. Brian Hartline's the offensive coordinator, but I don't think he's going to change a whole lot. He actually said he wants to get more explosive in the offense.
Yeah.
Corey Dennis talks about quarterbacks, extraordinary traits. The offense isn't going to change much. I don't think we would expect it to. They average 40 points a game. They do it at a really high level. They almost beat Georgia because of their offense. Like, as much as the defense probably needs to be able to mold a little bit, the offense can kind of do what it needs to. And so you don't see a shifting in philosophy. You just see expectations continue to be there for this offense, Andy. It's kind of more of the same, I guess, just a new offseason, new bodies in there, same expectations, especially on the offensive line.
Yeah, we're waiting on that offensive line. It's a big question mark. It continues to be a big question mark. They addressed it in the transfer portal in the spring window, bringing in Josh Simmons from San Diego State. He was a guy that was actually recruited by Justin Fry the first go-around when he was at UCLA. He talked about how he saw him at camps there.
Yeah.
Really liked what he saw back then, and he thought he could be a great player at that point, and now he still believes he can be a great player. There's some things that come up when you look at Josh Simmons and his time at right tackle at San Diego State. Penalties were a problem. Justin Fry said, well, that's not really a concern. You can coach out of that. Sometimes penalties are pinned on one guy when there was really a lot of things going wrong. The whole offensive line jumped, and that was just the closest guy to the referee, and they called it. So that isn't a concern for him. They seem to really like what he can bring potential-wise, skill set, and everything that he saw when he was out west back then at UCLA. It seems that he's going to figure into that right tackle competition, but right now Justin Fry is only comfortable with labeling him as a tackle. So they're not saying he'll be left or right, but our assumption would be that he'd figure into the right tackle.
It's never far from being the first time where you hear the term, we want our best 5 offensive linemen on the field. DeJuan Jones a couple of years ago, when all of a sudden he was on the field and they had 4 tackles and a center, theoretically.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all about getting the guys that consistently line up and take care of their business the first 2.5, 3 weeks of preseason camp. Those are the guys that are going to be on the field. I mean,
yeah.
And I know, like you said, we can go down a rabbit hole if we start talking about personnel stuff. But it's that right tackle position to me is still the question mark. I think Josh Fryer is going to play well at left tackle. We'll see if there ends up being a competition there. You know, for example, Luke Montgomery, how much he improves from the end of spring to the beginning of preseason camp and through preseason camp. For example, there's a freshman who can challenge, et cetera. But yeah, right tackle's got to get figured out.
Yeah, I would use 2021 as a cautionary tale for trying to find your best 5. Ohio State struggled to run the ball a lot of the year that year because there weren't guards on the field. And you've got your 2 guards that are really, really good players who played a lot of football. And Justin Fry talked about that as much. You know, you've got all these weapons around you. You've got almost a plug-and-play quarterback. Pick your 5-star between the 2 quarterbacks. You've got 2 guards that are very, very good at what they do.
I think he's leaving that unsaid.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And, you know,
he has the bulldozers.
You can say best 5, and your best 5 might mean Donovan Jackson moving to tackle. That doesn't mean you should move Donovan Jackson to tackle. And so, you know, 2021 serving as the cautionary tale, that wasn't a Justin Fry offensive line. He might have handled it a little differently. Who's to say at this point? But I think that we will learn a lot more about this offensive line in the next month, maybe even as much as we will in August, because I think whoever puts in the work here in these off-season weeks, you know, they talk about how important the winter is. This summer for this offensive line is just as important as August is, in my opinion. I think they've got to have a really, really solid next couple months to get to August and be more confident that they have the best 5 out there and they can keep the guards set.
Yeah. The problem with that, with offensive line play too, though, is you never know until you line up against a defensive player in pure, real football contact, you know, who's really made those progress. You're exactly right about it. I mean, technique is part of it. You want the technique to become second nature. And I thought we saw, for example, in the spring, Tegra Shabola rise from almost a wallflower, the best way I'd put it, from last year to like really competing by the end of spring.
Yeah.
And that's called progress. You know, it wasn't perfect as it went along, but there's a guy that showed you, yeah, he's working toward his upside, and they want to see more of that. That's just one example of what could really blossom in August.
Yeah, that interior is really strong. The tackle is definitely the competition we're looking at, but the interior, they also have Jacob James coming back,
right?
Who is a healthy center, who at one point we thought would be need center taking hold after Luke Whippler went to the NFL draft, and now you got more depth there at that position. You also have Big Cutler they brought in from the transfer portal. So now you got 3 centers that really could start at that position. Maybe you move one over to guard, maybe you don't. But they are really beefed up inside there, which is a good problem to have. So then it becomes, well, how do we fortify the outside? But
Yeah.
I think when you look at the offensive line, people are trying to push the panic button. I understand that, but the inside is actually they're kind of where they want to be.
Yeah, and
But also-
a guy we keep always leave out, for example, the guy who's played some significant moments here is Enoch Vimai. You know, he's in the, he's got, he's a guard center kind of, but mainly a guard guy. So they can still mix and match if they want to. Matt Jones, like you said, always gets work at center. At some point during practices or during a workup. So this thing is not settled at all, in my opinion, because they
No.
really want those best 5. But like you said, and you touched on, you don't want 2 guys out of position.
2021, you had it. You couldn't get on 3rd and 1. You couldn't get on 4th and 1. I mean,
Well,
that's,
yeah, but
that's
they were
what
still
happened.
pretty good. But you're right. But you just don't want those guys because it'll end up biting you, as it did with them
In
at some
2021.
point along the way.
Justin Fry did a really good job, before we get out of here, of making sure to say that now with Jacob James healthy, the competition is healthy. The competition is a really healthy one because you got 3 guys vying for the center job. Well, guess what? They brought in a right tackle, Tegra, Zen, Josh Simmons, 3 guys. That's a healthy competition.
Yep.
I think Ohio State feels way more confident in their tackle situation right now than they did April 15th. We'll see if that bears.
I think they
that bears
feel
out.
confident they've got players.
Yes.
Now they got to make that baseball glove.
Yeah, and so I think that this is a very confident program right now. You wouldn't know that they're on a 2-game losing streak talking to them at the end of May. I'll say that.
I don't know. We were talking to Jim Knowles. I think it was obvious.
But
some
they're-
questions.
they're
they
look-
were on a 2-game losing streak.
But they are looking forward, and they know how talented this team is what I'm trying to get at
sure.
there. This summer is going to tell us a lot about what the program does. We have all summer to talk about these things, which is why we're going to get out of here. The 40-year vet Tim May is going to get out of here. Andy Backstrom, I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Fellas, this week is tight ends week, huge week. Next week, running backs, then wide receivers, then we'll get to offensive line. We're not going to just blast out all this stuff we learned today. We'll go through those position weeks so we can really be in-depth about them. Please join us at lettermenrow.com. We would love to have you there. Great deals going on. lettermenrow.com. Come join us. The message board, Letterman Lounge, is always popping. Recruiting coverage from Matt Parker. These 2 cover the team with me. We're having a great time doing it. We love doing what we do. Come support us. Come join us. Andy Backstrom, Tim May, I'm Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the latest offseason report presented by Byers Auto. We will see you back at lettermenrow.com.
And a quick addendum, Spencer, have a great wedding and an even greater honeymoon, man, as you go to the islands of Hawaii, man. Wishing you good luck.
Thanks,
you
Tim.
and Corey.
Always appreciate it.